Someone who's a stickler for the rules, or maybe you're someone who's been waiting for a board game simply to open up the rulebook to see that it looks like it's been written in mumbo jumbo. Well, you're not alone in this case. I've played many board games and I often still feel those same feelings that you do right to this very moment. And often those can be really big hurdles for allowing us to enjoy a board game and fully immerse ourselves in the experience. In this video, we're going to be talking about my do's and don'ts for exploring rules to some of our favorite board games. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern Australian board gamer who loves sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends, and my family. Let's get this video started. Hey Danny, I think I'm gonna head to bed now. It's been a long day. Night, see you tomorrow. Don't let the board game bedbugs bite. Danny, I thought you said you were tired. It really helps me to get to sleep. The inspiration for this video actually came from my husband, which is probably the person I play board games with the most. I often try and reel him in on a Sunday morning to play 2 or 3 heavy Euros, and he kind of tries to convince me that, you know what, we should really only play 1. Sometimes I try and get 2 out of him, but you know, life gets in the way, we've got other things going on, and sometimes sometimes there are weekends that go by where we don't even get to play a board game. Sad face. But you know what? One of the biggest hurdles I've found is actually just doing the rules teach, or getting through the rules, or reading the rules. There's a lot of videos and resources online and apps that help to teach you games, but there's no denying the fact that reading a rulebook isn't the most enjoyable experience. It's kind of like reading like a novel for school, and you're kind of forced to learn it because if you don't learn it, you can't really play the game. Sometimes games that have less rules but a lot of deep strategy to it are probably games I'm going to get to the table a lot more often because the rule teach can be minimized and the gameplay experience can be maximized. There's a bit of a balance between having a rulebook that's 36 pages long and a rulebook that's simply on a double-sided card. Which one is better? Which one has the better game design? Does a thicker rulebook mean that you're going to have a much more fun board game experience? Well, that's in question. One of my hubby's biggest pet peeves when it comes to playing board games is not the fact that, okay, maybe the games do take up a lot of space in our house, that can be for another video, but the fact that every time we sit down to play a new game, he's got to sit through a big, long rules teach. Whilst he's played a lot of games and is familiar with a lot of game concepts, you know, just having to power through learning new rules each and every time we play a new game can be actually quite frustrating. He's actually shared a lot of this frustration with me, mainly because we play a lot of new games and sometimes you don't get to revisit older games that we like and get them out to play again, which I think I should. He just finds the learning process of it really hard. I often try and find lots of different ways to try and make the rules teach a lot easier. We basically act out the game and then we play it, or I just simply say, we do this and you've got these 3 options. And that tends to make the rules a little bit more palatable. There is a fine line between having a lot of rules and equating it to complexity. You can have a game that is complex, but has a simple rule set that's easy to grasp, easy to dive into, that makes logical sense. And this is where I think sometimes games do fall at the seams, because the first time someone plays your board game, that's probably the first and possibly the last time they may play that game. And so that first initial game experience is so crucially important. If you don't have an enjoyable game experience the first time you play a game, you may not revisit that game again. And if other people have that same shared feeling, then that game, which could be the most amazing game ever, might not ever see, you know, another play. And that saddens me quite a lot, because I feel like, well, if there's a good game under there, how will people know there's a good game under there if a lot of the rules clutter and rule exceptions get in the way? And so sometimes I often give games the benefit of the doubt. If I don't like a game the first time, I'll try and play it a couple more times, but not everyone has the time to do that. So making sure that the first game experience is a smooth and good one is so important. So there are some games that literally have like a shortcut to getting your first game on the table. Here are the steps you follow, set these pieces up, now play. And I love that. One of the first board game don'ts I want to talk about is the fact that a lot of games have rule exceptions. They'll say, do step 1, resolve this action, do step 2, get these resources, do step 3, get these points, except when you do this, and except when you do that, and except, and that can often create a lot of confusions. Now, I understand the need to have exceptions because an action might seem overpowered, so if you don't have an exception, then it doesn't really make the game feel balanced. But remembering those exceptions can actually be challenging and a burden for players. And without a player aid that has those exceptions printed on it, it can even make the game experience a little bit tougher to get through. So I often feel like board game rule exceptions feel like band-aid solutions to, some design mechanics. The idea that, okay, we really want to do this particular mechanic, but we haven't been able to flesh out how we get around the exceptions or balance issues. And I feel like that extra time invested in making sure that the balance is right and the actions make sense in your game without having to have rule exceptions means that your game is going to probably get played more. I often find that if you can make the rules as easy to understand, reduce the volume of rules, but make the choices more complex and deeper, then you're probably going to have a game that's going to be a lot more interesting. And my prime example is basically, when a player takes an action, if that action can branch off into 3 or 4 different choices for that play that makes an impactful effect on their game, then that's going to be a more well-designed game. Because not only do players only have to think about moving 1 or 2 spaces or taking 1 or 2 actions, they can then see how those actions lead to other things. Do this really well, and that is Great Western Trail, because all you do is move your little worker along the trail, and then you basically take the action of the building space that you land on. So you're seeing 2 or 3 options in front of you on the trail, but then you can kind of think on another player's turn which of those actions is going to best benefit what you want to do. And so whilst the game is complex, the choices and the rules are a lot simpler. There is a fine line where account keeping can overshadow the actual fun and strategy of a game. If your game is really fiddly or there's a lot of upkeeping, and I'm talking about Dinosaur World, those boredom tokens, which are literally like this small, and I think I've replaced my boredom tokens with like D6s, which help to track a little bit easier. I often wonder whether there are solutions to different account keeping problems. So when there's a game where you have to manage a lot of pieces, if that management and physical management can be simplified by using a track with a single marker or maybe a group of resources, then that's probably going to make the game feel more fun. And I like to use the expression, hide the broccoli in the spaghetti meatball. And that's basically, if there is account keeping in your game, if you can disguise it thematically, disguise in a way where it's part of the fun experience, then you can kind of get away with a little bit of extra account keeping. But if it's glaringly obvious that all you're doing is just moving things around and you're not getting any value from it, I feel like that's something worth culling. Try and make the rules make sense thematically. You're doing this action because it works with what that thing would do in real life. If it is a zoo, I'm placing this food in this enclosure because it's going to feed the animal, and then the animal's going to reproduce and grow and get larger. That makes sense to me. If you're doing rules that don't really fit in with the theme of the game, it can feel a little bit jarring, especially when you're trying to learn the game. On the flip side, there are some times when I've read some rulebooks where they use a lot of thematic jargon, where it's like, put this amazing little flower in this spot with this weird name, but then when you see this word, do this, and then when you see that word, do that, and then you're lost in the vocabulary that's kind of swirling in this rulebook, and you're just simply trying to comprehend, is it just, you just want me to put this flower in this spot to do this action? Is that all you want? I love thematic touches in rulebooks. In fact, I actually prefer it when a rulebook kind of outlines the rules simply, but then they have little boxes that explains the thematic reason behind it. That separation actually makes it more interesting because it's like you do this action and it's like, oh, this is why you do it, because this is how it fits into the world of the game. One thing I love to see in a rulebook is plenty of pictures, plenty of examples and scenarios that literally take you through how to actually resolve an action. For example, there's pictures in a lot of rulebooks which literally say, okay, the red player has this many resources and does this action. This is what happens to them. The blue player does this, and this is the result, and this is how you resolve it. I love rulebooks that are sequential when they explain the steps and not just, scattergun their way through the rules of a game. And I love it when there's pictures that literally clearly spell out what you actually do. One thing that really sells me over when I look for a game is basically when a game just does one or two things really well. And I think that's something that my hubby has often spoken to me about. He often enjoys games that really just focus on one or two mechanics that have been fleshed out in a different way. It might be a twist and a worker placement mechanic that's linked to resource gathering, or it might be a creative use of cards. And I think Forest Shuffle is probably one that comes to mind, where the multifunctional use of cards is used in an interesting and unique way, yet there's only really one kind of focused mechanic in the game. I mean, I actually like point salad games, which are completely on the other end of the spectrum. So games like Bitoku, where you basically have 8 different ways where you can get points, and then at the end you kind of go, ooh, how did I get points throughout the game? I did a bit of this, a bit of that, moved up the Bitoku track. I like games like that, and it doesn't bother me as much, but it does mean it does take a lot more time to learn the games. So when a game does come along that really dives deep into one thing really well, I think that actually is a bit of a selling point, actually, and I think I'm more inclined to say that I'll probably get to play that more often. I always like to think from a new player's perspective when exploring a rulebook. I always like to imagine, look, if someone were to open the game for the first time, what was the first thing that they will see? What's the first thing they'll experience? It's like walking into a brand new shop and seeing the display out the front of the shop and go, ooh, I love that jacket. Ooh, I love that set of shoes. And then stepping into the shop and going, I can see more of what I liked from outside the shop. And no one likes walking into a shop and going, oh, the inside of this shop is so different from the outside of the shop. Sometimes it's a good thing. I'm not saying that's bad, but it can mean that the willingness to play a game can be diminished if it is not something that makes sense. So what did you think of this board game rules discussion? Do you think a lot of board games have too many rules? Do you think there could be some way we can change how easy it is to learn a new game? All I know is that learning a new game requires a lot of time, and the less hurdles us game players have to jump through, then the more chances that we'll actually get to play more games. And that's what we really want to do. We don't want to sit there and wait for a loading screen or try and learn rules unless the rule experience is part of the game experience. So what are your thoughts? Please leave your stories, experiences in the comment section below. I'd love to hear and chat with you. If you really like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. If you want to see more exclusive Board Game Sanctuary content, please head over to my Patreon page, and you also get the power to influence what video topics come out on this channel in the future. This is Danny signing out. I hope your next game is an amazing one. See you soon.